Hey everyone, I'm Case Aiken. Now, when I appeared on the Reels of Justice podcast for the first time to defend Alien 3 The Assembly Cut, I knew I was walking into a fight. Alien 3 is, after all, one of the most maligned sequels in science fiction history. It's the film that dared to kill off beloved characters off screen before the movie even started, sideline the heavy action of aliens, and lean into bleak, grimy existentialism instead. It's not flashy, it's not crowd-pleasing, and for years, it was almost impossible to love publicly. And yet, I do love it. Now, that love isn't blind. I know the movie has problems. Troubled production, inconsistent character work, a disjointed theatrical cut that, pardon the pun, alienated even its own director. But when you look at the film through a particular lens, its choices begin to make sense. They become not just defensible, but purposeful. See, on the show, I argued that Alien 3, taken as the final chapter of the original Alien trilogy, mirrors the structure of Beowulf. The comparison clicked hard enough with the hosts that they coined a new phrase on the spot: the Beowulf Defense. Well, what is the Beowulf Defense? It's the idea that a flawed work can still be worthy, even great, when it follows the emotional and mythic structure of a classic tale. That a story can succeed through resonance, not perfection. That we should consider why a story is told a certain way, not just whether it meets our expectations. And in the case of Alien 3, the Beowulf Defense is more than just a clever metaphor. It's a legitimate framework that reveals a larger, more thoughtful structure beneath the grime and sorrow. It's not about excusing the film's flaws, it's about showing that its shape, the story it tells and how it ends, is doing something deliberate, something epic. In the sections ahead, I'll break down that structure, map the trilogy to the key beats of Beowulf, and explain why this isn't just a fun reading of the film. It's the reason Alien 3 works. So, what is the Beowulf Defense? The Beowulf Defense is, at its core, a critical lens. It doesn't pretend that a film is without flaws. It doesn't argue that a rough production, muddled editing, or polarizing reception can't exist. What it does argue is that a work can be artistically and thematically valuable because it engages with a larger narrative tradition, specifically myth. In this case, the myth is Beowulf, the oldest surviving English epic. It's a tale of monsters, legacy, fatal wounds, and earned death. And it's a story that mirrors Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3 in structure far more than you'd expect from a franchise built on body horror and acid blood. The Beowulf Defense says, even if a film like Alien 3 is messy, even if it disappoints fans expecting action and catharsis, it still holds artistic value when its structure mirrors a timeless story. It's a defense not of perfection, but of intention. Most film criticism focuses on execution. Does this work? Does this land? The Beowulf Defense looks at why the creators made the choices they did, and whether those choices fit a larger narrative framework. Sometimes a story feels off, not because it's broken, but because it's playing by an older mythic rulebook. And in the case of Alien 3, that rulebook is Beowulf. That doesn't mean Alien 3 is a strict adaptation of Beowulf. It's not explicitly a one-to-one retelling, but it is a story that rhymes with the epic. It follows the emotional cadence, the structural rhythm, and the symbolic arc of that ancient text. So when we apply the Beowulf Defense, we're not excusing the film's flaws, we're arguing that its shape, its bones, have weight, that the echoes of Beowulf aren't accidental, and that recognizing those echoes reveal a deeper narrative truth. Alien 3 is the tragedy that completes the mythic art of Ellen Ripley. To understand how the Alien trilogy mirrors Beowulf, we need to step back and look at the structure of the epic itself. Beowulf isn't just a story of one great battle. It's a life told in mythic chapters. 3 monsters, 3 trials, 3 stages of a hero's arc. And with each confrontation, the hero loses a piece of himself until all that's left is the legend. The Alien trilogy, intentionally or not, follows that same rhythm. Each film presents a new kind of monster, not just biologically, but symbolically. And Ripley, like Beowulf, is reshaped by each encounter until her final sacrifice seals her story as a myth, not just a character arc. So let's break it down. Alien, 1979. In Beowulf, the first monster is Grendel, a twisted, violent offspring of Cain, the first murderer. He stalks the great halls of Heorot, killing and terrorizing without reason. He is the ultimate intruder, a force from outside the walls of civilization. The xenomorph in Ridley Scott's Alien is Grendel. It is monstrous not just in form, but in nature. Unknowable, unnatural, uninvited, it enters the confines of the Nostromo, our modern-day mead hall, and slaughters indiscriminately. Its arrival is preceded by a distress call that our heroes respond to, or at least they think they're responding to. It is quite literally a son of Cain, spawned from the Nostromo crew member Cain, born of violent betrayal, existing only to kill. Ripley, like the warriors of old, must survive the unthinkable, but unlike those warriors, she is alone. There's no fellowship in Alien, no backup, just her against the beast. And like Beowulf in his first triumph, she earns her legend, launching the creature into the vacuum of space. Next up, Aliens, 1986. If the first monster is the child, the second is the mother. In Beowulf, after Grendel is slain, the hero descends into the deep to face Grendel's mother, a greater, more furious force. She fights for revenge, for legacy, for blood. Aliens follows this exactly. Ripley returns not just to the source of the original trauma, but to its nest, to the Queen. This time she isn't just surviving, she's rescuing, protecting, fighting with purpose. Her descent into the hive is literal, and the battle with the Queen is operatic. The stakes are generational. This is no longer one monster, it's an entire species with a matriarch. And crucially, Ripley wins, just as Beowulf does. But that victory comes at a cost. She's no longer just a survivor, she's now a mother figure, a protector, a myth in the making. Which brings us to Alien 3, 1992. And then, the dragon. In Beowulf, the final act comes many years later. Beowulf, now older and weary, faces a dragon, an impersonal, destructive force born of greed and time. The dragon doesn't invade the hall. Beowulf goes to it. It is a death march. He slays the dragon, but not before being mortally wounded. His legacy dies with him. And Alien 3 is that story. This time Ripley doesn't run. She knows death is coming. She carries it inside her, literally. A queen embryo grows within her. She has become the vessel of the final threat. And like Beowulf, she chooses to face it alone. The prison colony is her burrow. The xenomorph is the dragon. There is no triumphant victory here, just inevitability. And her final act isn't survival, it's sacrifice. She destroys herself to destroy the future of the thing that has haunted her life. Hell, in the theatrical cut, her death is literally shown as being engulfed in flame while birthing the damnable queen. It's not a happy ending, but it is a mythic one. In all three films, Ripley evolves from survivor to warrior to martyr. Like Beowulf, her story isn't about winning, it's about meaning. And when you see the trilogy through this lens, Alien 3 doesn't feel like a betrayal, it feels like a funeral hymn. There's no getting around the fact that Alien 3 is a deeply flawed film, especially in its theatrical form. The production was famously chaotic. The final cut was taken away from the director, David Fincher, and entire subplots were lost to the editing room floor. Fans who loved Aliens walked into the theater expecting Aliens 2, and instead got existential dread in a meat grinder. So yes, on the surface, it's a letdown. But surface isn't everything. This is where the Beowulf Defense steps in, not as a dismissal of those flaws, but as a reframing. The structure of a story can matter more than its polish. In fact, the shape of a narrative, its thematic architecture, can give it weight and meaning that transcends clunky dialogue, uneven tone, or bad studio meddling. I mean, think about it. Beowulf is the story that begins with a terrifying monster, escalates to a more intimate threat, and ends with a dragon that kills the hero. It's about scale, consequence, and inevitability. It's about a hero becoming a legend through three escalating trials. That's the skeleton of Alien, Aliens, and Alien 3. That's why Alien 3 matters, not because it satisfies fans or lands every beat, but because it completes the myth. Ripley's journey doesn't need to be tidy, it needs to mean something, and it does. In the assembly cut, the meaning is clearer. The film breathes, characters have arcs, the nihilism becomes poetry. You see a woman who has faced the worst the universe can offer, and instead of trying to beat it one more time, she chooses to end it on her terms. That's structure, that's myth, that's Beowulf. And if a story can pull that off, even imperfectly, it deserves to be remembered not just as a disappointment, but as a tragedy. A proper ending, a tale worth telling again. Now, I should note that the Beowulf Defense isn't just about Alien 3. It's a way of looking at flawed, divisive, or deceptively simple films and asking, is this structure familiar? Is it resonating with something older, deeper, something mythic? When you use that lens, you start to see echoes everywhere. Look at Attack of the Clones. This is Uther Pendragon and the tragedy of legacy. Often it's considered the weakest of the Star Wars prequels. Attack of the Clones is messy in tone and execution, but what if we stop trying to read it as a sci-fi thriller and instead read it as an Arthurian prelude? Anakin Skywalker is Uther Pendragon. Powerful, emotionally volatile, capable of great passion and great destruction. His forbidden relationship with Padme reflects the fateful union that creates legacy and ruins peace. The film's central tragedy isn't about action, it's about failure to contain fire before it destroys a kingdom. That's myth, even if it is extremely clunky. Look at Clueless. Emma with shoulder pads. We all know Clueless is an adaptation of Jane Austen's Emma, but the Beowulf Defense helps explain why it works even for people who don't know Austen at all. It maps classic social structure, generational roles, and the arc of self-awareness onto a 90s teen setting. The myth here isn't swords and dragons, instead dwelling on class, image, and identity. And the structure carries the story, giving emotional weight to what could have just been another high school comedy. And speaking of high school comedies, 10 Things I Hate About You, aka The Taming of the Shrew in Combat Boots. I mean, like Clueless, this film finds its strength not in novelty, but in rhyming with an older work, The Taming of the Shrew. What elevates it isn't just charm or cast, though both are great, it's that it carries the tension of the original text. The question of how much rebellion is performative and how much is survival. That structural backbone allows it to be both romantic and satirical, because it's been sharpened by 400 years of audience familiarity, even if most viewers don't consciously notice it. Lastly, I want to call attention to Predator, which is the first act of Beowulf with guns. This one's wild, but hear me out. The original Predator is a war movie that transforms into a monster movie that ends as a one-on-one mythic duel. Dutch, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, enters the jungle as a leader of men, but is stripped of comrades, weapons, even civilization itself. By the end, he's fighting with mud and traps, alone on primal terms. Beowulf begins the same way. A warrior enters a hall, meets a monster no one else can fight, and earns his survival by wits and brute force. Predator works not because it's full of plot. Let's be honest, it barely has any. It works because it's structured like a story we've known since the 8th century. The Beowulf Defense isn't about saying, you just don't get it. It's about recognizing that some stories resonate because they echo older rhythms. And sometimes, a work that feels thin or messy or incomplete is actually drawing on something deeper. It doesn't fix every movie, but it explains why some of them feel more important than they look. Alien 3 may never win over everyone. It's too quiet, too bleak, too messy, especially when compared to the adrenaline highs of Aliens or the primal horror of Alien. But when you step back and look at the structure, the bones of the story, you see something else entirely. You see Beowulf. Like Beowulf, Ripley fights 3 great monsters. Like Beowulf, her journey begins in terror and ends in sacrifice. She grows from survivor to hero to martyr. Her death is a culmination, a sealing of the myth. And that's what the Beowulf Defense is about. It's a reminder that stories don't have to be perfect to be powerful. They don't have to resolve every plot thread or satisfy every fan theory. Sometimes what matters is whether the story rhymes with something deeper, something older. Alien 3 does that. It mirrors an epic. It echoes a funeral poem. It completes a myth. So call it flawed, call it frustrating, but don't call it empty. It's not a failure. It's a legend.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.